Hello, I'm Sami Zaidan. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week,
we have a clear plan of such a situation, if it happens, how we're going to deal with it immediately within hours.
Qatar's economy minister explains how the government is keeping the country running in the face of the regional embargo. Also ahead, Qatar Airways says the blockade will hurt its bottom line in the near term, but the carrier sees opportunities to expand into other untapped markets. Plus,
I'm Ella Callan in Berlin, where travellers from across the EU are benefiting from the end of mobile phone roaming charges.
Well, Qatar may have been isolated economically by its Gulf neighbours, but its financial markets have stabilised after an initial week of losses. The government says it has the resources to cope with the regional sanctions. And the finance minister is warning if Qatar loses money, countries behind the embargo will lose money too. Credit rating agency Standard & Poor's says Qatari banks are strong enough to hold on, even if all Gulf money is pulled and more. And it's not just Qatari banks. The UAE's main lenders could lose out from a slowdown in business coming from Qatar. Qatar says gas exports, its top export earner, are on track, though importers are expected to push for sweeter deals. These gas supplies matter for the UAE too. The Undersea Dolphin Energy Agency supplies the UAE and Oman with about 56 million cubic meters of Qatari gas a day. It's still operating despite diplomatic tension. As for food supplies, Turkey and Iran are benefiting at the expense of Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Indian and European companies are expected to step in too with sugar. Now, for construction materials, Qatar says its supply chains are already in place. There's uncertainty, though, over the operations of UAE-based companies and contractors in Qatar. Qatar's economy minister Ahmed bin Jassim Al Thani says the government is already proving it can keep the country running. He's been speaking to Al Jazeera's Jamal Al-Shayal.
Let's start with talking about the day-to-day life of normal citizens here in Qatar, both Qataris and expats who are living here. What impact has this siege had on them?
Yeah, when you talk about the impact, if we look at the Qatar economy is strong, resilient. All the indicators talk about like Qatar economy is the 18th most competitive in the world, the second microeconomic efficiency and good efficiency. So the indicator a very strong financial position for Qatar. Qatar is one of the strongest economy in the world. Looking at the diversification of the economy of Qatar, 61% of GDP come from non-oil and gas. Our import, our trade with the world is 330 billion Qatari riyal, and it is a diversified economy, as I mentioned, supported by the Qatar Vision economy, Qatar Vision 2030. All these indicators and the strength of the Qatar economy give it some sort of resilient and immune to deal with such situation. The blockage mainly is for the land border, around 14% of our total trade. We have a clear plan of such a situation, if it happens, how we're going to deal with it immediately within hours. We activate this plan. The alternative source is already identified, and the alternative point of entrance, like either by air or by sea, immediately diverted. And we are seeing the supply chain now moving very smoothly.
So people in Qatar were used to buying their milk and chicken produced from Saudi Arabia and brought here. Now they're seeing it from other countries. You managed to change that, as you mentioned, in just a few hours. Can you explain how, aside from these impacts, has there been any other impacts, or has the impact of the siege been very minimal?
The impact of the siege, or the impact in the economy of Qatar, was very limited. And as I said, we have a clear plan and we know exactly how to deal with it. More than this, we built a strategic reserve for the main strategic either food or also other materials for our project. That's why we were ready to deal with such a situation immediately within hours. Immediately. This plan has been identified, the source has been activated, the alternative source, and we start to import, you mentioned milk, like immediately from Turkey and other sources. And as you can see, the shelves was always full and never empty after in the first day of the blockage. We're really now not talking about the primary need for the consumer. We are talking about maintaining the level of the lifestyle that Qataris and who live in Qatar experience, and that's where we are. We just now today I'm talking to you, I'm comfortable that all the supply chain, either from air or by sea, is working as smooth as normal. The goods that used to go to Jebel Ali and re-exported here to Qatar, either by sea again or by land, have been all diverted to Sahar and Salalah. And by the agreement with the main ship lines. Also, we announced a direct ship from Salalah and from Sahar to Hamad port. More than this, also we have a new line will come directly from India to Hamad port. So even what you are the challenge that we are facing, creating opportunities for the others.
You also, aside from having one of the highest GDPs in the world, you have some of the biggest infrastructure projects that are taking place. You're gearing up to the World Cup 2022. There's a massive metro system that's being built. Has the siege had an impact on these big infrastructure projects?
You know, all the infrastructure projects, either related to 2022 World Cup or related to the actual plan infrastructure development and upgrade that we are doing here, talking about metro, highways and others. All will be in schedule. There is no impact on it. Primary material, the main primary material is some of them manufactured here in Qatar, like the cement, the steel and the sand available here, and it's enough for Qatar, and even we export it. For the others, immediately, as I said, first of all, for the others, we have a reserve, a strategic reserve for more than a year. So if we really don't export or import this primary material for a year, we have enough to cover all our projects, the infrastructure project and also the private sector project, which is other projects. But alternative source has been identified. But the blockage for the primary material, building material, has no impact, because initially it was coming by sea, and it's continuing now to come by sea. And Hamad port now is working at its full potential, working smooth as a clock. And Hamad airport and more than 150 destination is as per schedule, working smoothly by Qatar Airways, except for the 4 countries that have the blockage in Qatar. Otherwise, everything is moving like clock.
It appears that there's a few silver linings when it comes to this challenge, or the siege that's been imposed, that you've managed to turn some of these challenges into opportunities, like, for example, the increase in trade that's come to Hamad port, the new naval or sea lines or trade routes that have happened. Can you tell me about them?
As I said to you, I mean, the challenges create opportunities. And that's what we are seeing. And from what I see, I think the logistic landscape in the region is kind of changing now. Most of our goods and other country goods coming through Oman, as I said, with agreement with the main ship liner. And also a direct line start to come to Hamad port from all around the world. And also the source of goods also. We discovered a new source of goods that open up opportunity that we were not, probably the private sector were not aware of or exposed to it, but these challenges will give them this new access to new market, to new goods and probably new quality.
It's one of the world's fastest growing airlines and crucial to Qatar's efforts to become a transportation hub. Qatar Airways has posted massive profits for the financial year ending in March. But now the carriers had to scrap dozens of daily flights to Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain and Egypt. And it has to take longer routes to avoid large parts of the Arabian Peninsula it's barred from. UAE-based carriers Etihad and Emirates may benefit in the short run, but analysts warn that fears of geopolitical instability in the region will hurt the global brand of all Gulf-based carriers. The UN's aviation body has been hosting talks in Canada to resolve the Gulf flight embargo. Qatar wants the ban to be declared illegal. Earlier, Al Jazeera's Andrew Simmons met with Qatar Airways Group Chief Executive Akbar Al-Bakir. He asked him about the company's latest results and its strategy to contain the current crisis.
On a positive note, let me to say that I'm delighted to announce Qatar Airways profit of $541 million. It is a record profit in the history of our airline, and at the same time we have also had a robust passenger number growth, 20.01% increase year on year, which again is one of the strongest growth figure in our industry. So we are very resilient as an airline. However, I do agree that there are some dark clouds, and I should not be hiding my concern that yes, we will underperform, but not to the extent of our neighbors, because Qatar Airways has a very strong growth plan. You know that not too long ago I announced that I was going to increase 24 new destinations. I couldn't do it because I had capacity restraint. Now that we have released capacity from the 18 destinations that we have been barred illegally from operating, we are now going to accelerate the other regions of the world where we feel that we will mitigate the reduction in passenger numbers from these 18 destinations.
Tell me this, let's just look back first of all. Let's start chronologically. Back to June the 5th, Monday morning, you were in Cancun, Mexico, major aviation conference. Word came through, I think you were quite late to hear, or a few minutes went by before you heard. And you heard, what was it like? What was going through your head as you boarded that executive jet to fly straight back to Qatar?
Well, you know, this is the last thing any CEO of an airline would want to hear, that the airspace in which it operates, international airspace in which it operates, has illegally been blocked. And I had to, of course, find my way out quickly. It was very difficult for me to find a way to come here quickly, but I did, because this is a call of duty.
That's what I want to pick up on. We've heard of air wars. This transcends everything. Do you feel that in effect you're under attack? In fact, Qatar is under attack, being held to ransom, almost like being in a real war with an attempted siege going on?
Well, it is. Qatar is being economically held at ransom. But you know, Qatar is very resilient for an airline. For us, the biggest priority is for us to have a gateway in and out of my country, which we are very successfully handling. And at the same time, it is our passengers, for which it is our responsibility. First, to reroute them. Second, to give them a full refund if they chose to do so. And thirdly, that if they choose to travel on Qatar Airways, that we give them the highest amount of care that we give to our passengers. Qatar Airways is very strong financially. We will persevere, and at the same time we will make sure that every single passenger is guaranteed that if it chose, after booking on Qatar Airways, not to travel on Qatar Airways, we will give them their refund. So they don't have any at all risk of losing the money that they have invested in Qatar Airways. But let me tell you something, that as we are being affected, so our neighbors who have got into this illegal act in blocking us, their national carriers are also getting affected. What is also doing is letting the entire region's air connectivity confidence to be lost. So they are in the same basket. So they should not think that they'll be going laughing to the bank whilst they are putting economic pain on my country.
But tell me this, though. Give me an idea, please, of just what it means, the business in this region that you're losing because of these measures.
Yes, we are losing nearly 22 to 25% of business in this region because of the blockade and the restriction on the 18 destinations I mentioned earlier. But as I said, Qatar Airways has other ways to fill in this void that has been created by these 18 destinations that we operated to.
Still to come on counting the cost, tough talk from the European Union as a fractured election verdict leaves Britain struggling to frame its Brexit position. But first, the US Federal Reserve has raised interest rates by a quarter point to 1.25%. It's the fourth hike in 18 months. And it's signalled another hike is likely this year, indicating confidence in the state of the US economy. The unemployment rate is at its lowest in 16 years. Domestically, the rate hike will affect borrowers who will have to pay more on credit card debt. But this could also prompt investors to move money out of developing countries to earn more in the US. Fallen internet brand Yahoo is no longer a publicly traded company, with Verizon completing its takeover. Its email and other digital services such as sports, finance and news will be part of a new Verizon subsidiary called Oath. The new company combines what's left of Yahoo and another internet pioneer, AOL, which was bought by Verizon 2 years ago. But Verizon's not getting Yahoo's prize stakes in two Asian internet companies, Alibaba and Yahoo Japan. They'll go to a newly formed company called Alibaba. The chief executive of the ride-sharing app Uber says he'll take an indefinite leave of absence. Travis Kalanick's announcement follows an outside review into the company's controversial practices. Uber's been under increasing pressure over sexual harassment and allegations of an aggressive workplace culture. It's also accused of corporate espionage and using covert software to mislead government regulators. The review calls for changes to the board and more employee diversity. Well, it was meant to give Britain's Prime Minister Theresa May a stronger hand in upcoming Brexit talks with the European Union. But the snap election has left the ruling Conservative Party's majority in shambles. May had campaigned on a hard Brexit that would see Britain leave the EU and restrict immigration. But now she doesn't have a parliamentary majority. There are calls for a soft Brexit, which may allow Britain to stay in the common market with reduced rights. This would also maintain current rules for millions of EU nationals living and working in the UK. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said that the EU wants to negotiate quickly and in the agreed time frame. The new French leader, Emmanuel Macron, is a vocal advocate of European integration, reducing Britain's room to manoeuvre. European officials are piling on the pressure, with the chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, saying, "I can't negotiate with myself." For the European perspective, I spoke to Swedish economist and writer Fredrik Eriksson. He's the director of the European Centre for International Political Economy, a world economy think tank based in Brussels. I began by asking him if he thought the UK election result would strengthen the EU's hands in negotiations.
I think, most of all, that both those involved in the actual negotiations on the EU side, as well as the heads of governments, the prime ministers, the Angela Merkels, the Emmanuel Macrons, etc., I think they're going to find it extraordinarily difficult to negotiate with a country, with a government like the one in the UK right now, where it's not just that the hands has weakened, it's that we have a chaotic situation in the British Parliament where there's not going to be a majority for either form or outcome. And it's difficult for all involved in negotiations to actually negotiate about something when you don't know what the outcome should be and whether that outcome actually can get the parliamentary approval. So I don't think they are happy or believe that their hands have been strengthened by the outcome of the British election. I think they are more fearful that this is a process which is about to collapse entirely.
That is a very important point. So does that mean, according to your analysis there, then, that a softer Brexit is more likely?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, I think the problem right now is that there is no majority for any form of Brexit outcome in the British Parliament. So we have a Conservative Party who is going to remain in power with a weakened Prime Minister, but one who is still beholden to the Brexit headbangers in her own party. I don't think the Conservative Party itself is going to change its opinion.
Hang on for a second, Frederick. Then why do you think so many analysts are predicting that perhaps Theresa May's government is going to be beholden to the Brexit headbangers, and that means a softer Brexit is likely? Have they got it all wrong?
Yeah, I think many of the commentators I'm seeing, I think, practice wishful thinking more than anything else. I've seen a lot of commentary suggesting that the strong performance of the Labour Party in the election was actually sort of a sign that people wanted a softer Brexit. I'm not so sure about that at all. The Labour Party, after all, is a party that campaigned on actually leaving the single market, leaving the customs union, having immigration controls and not be under the sovereignty of the European Court of Justice. So we have 85% of the parliament is still made up of parties that at least nominally want to take Britain to a hard Brexit.
So with a good dosage of political chaos, as you put it there, going on in the UK, what does that practically mean for specific Brexit issues? Is it going to be harder for the UK to push back on things like the so-called divorce bill, immigration control and so on?
The big difficulties will be that if Britain doesn't have its own idea where it wants to end up, what type of post-Brexit agreement that it wants to have with the EU, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult to negotiate on any form of issue. The Brexit bill, citizen rights, police, terrorism, collaboration, etc. So we're going to see that sort of despite the intention right now of the British government, which is to start the negotiations next week with citizen rights type of issues, residence issues, we're very soon going to sort of head into a situation where the British government needs to make up its mind what type of outcome it wants. And if it cannot make that decision, if it's tried to sort of delay it, it means we're going to have all the other negotiations being stalled as well.
All right, good to get your thoughts on that. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Now, if you ventured outside your mobile phone network's coverage area, you'll know roaming charges stack up pretty quickly. Now, the European Union is scrapping them for customers across the bloc. But consumer advocates are worried phone companies will try to claw back the charges in some other way. Ella Callan reports from Berlin.
It's taken a decade, but finally it's the end of mobile roaming charges in Europe. People in Europe can go on holidays or business trips without worrying about being hit with a big bill at home.
We're not talking about 5 or 10 euros. It's about 100 or 200 euros.
Mine's at £42 at the minute, so is it? Yeah. Oh. I've been charged a lot, so hopefully it won't be any more.
The new law is called Roam Like Home. It restricts the wholesale prices that phone companies can charge each other within Europe, savings that must be passed on to the consumer. This fulfills one of the big promises of European integration, a tangible benefit for people living in the EU. Wherever you travel, text messages, phone calls and data will cost the same as at home. The European Union says roaming charges have come down more than 90% since the law was first proposed in 2007.
It's not so easy to just abolish roaming, and we had to apply some safeguards that we won't crash operators out of the market in some places where prices are cheap.
But the new legislation isn't impressing the phone companies. Some estimates show they could lose millions of dollars in revenue.
Depending on the telephone provider, roaming could make up to 10% of total revenue. We think there will be an attempt to make up the missing revenue in other ways.
The EU says it's on the lookout for phone operators trying to undermine the rules by increasing other charges or upselling. Customers won't get away with indefinite roaming either. Carriers can charge extra fees if usage is mostly outside of home base. Phone users are advised to check their contracts for rules on roaming in non-EU countries, such as Switzerland and Andorra. In Britain, the ban may be short-lived. Free roaming is up for negotiation after Brexit.
And that's our show for this week. You can get in touch with us by using the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or drop us an email. countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our address. There's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That'll take you straight to our page, which has individual reports, links, and entire episodes for you to catch up on. That's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Sami Zaidan. On behalf of the whole team, thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.